Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So about a month ago, before the offseason really started to get underway, I posted a list of the top 8 teams, the top 8 playoff teams from the 2024 season that I thought were most likely to miss the 2025 playoffs. What teams were going to get knocked out, a team was going to come up and replace them. And I thought, considering now that the bulk of the offseason is done, like 98% of the major moves have gone down at this point, I thought that I would revise this. So we're going to start with number 16, the teams that I think they're like absolute playoff locks, and work our way all the way down to the team that I think is the least likely to make the playoffs yet again. I'll probably do the same with the non-playoff teams. Who's the most likely to make the playoffs? You probably know which one will be number one for that video. But let's get into it, because every single year I think like the stat is like there's usually four teams that fall out of the playoffs, 4 new teams come in. So I think like within the top 5 or 4, I could definitely see a lot of teams missing. There's probably like 8 spots that are locked up. But let's get into it. Up first, the Edmonton Oilers, 16th. They're making the playoffs. When looking at it, the final three quarters of the season, they were the best team in the NHL. As long as Stuart Skinner plays half decent with the team that he's going to have in front of him, they should be north of 105 points, most likely. The second least likely to fall out of a playoff spot, the Dallas Stars. Even though I don't like the Matt Dumba and Ilya Lyubushkin pickups, I don't like that in terms of them, a potential Western Conference matchup against the Edmonton Oilers. I'm not worried one bit with all the young talent that they have that they're going to end up missing the playoffs. They're still the heavy favorite to win the Central Division, in my opinion. At third, again, this isn't a repeat of my power rankings. I did like my early top 10, because at third, I actually have the Colorado Avalanche, who were like 6th or 7th on my power rankings. But I think when looking at the Colorado Avalanche, a team with Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, and Mikko Rantanen, unless they have disastrous injuries, that team is just not missing the playoffs. When looking at it, I factor in like the variability. So some of these teams that are going to be high that I think potentially could miss the playoffs were maybe on my top 10, my preseason top 10, just because of the variability. But when looking at the Colorado Avalanche, they safely made the playoffs, the last 5 seasons. So yet again, barring a torn ACL or something like that, God forbid, the Colorado Avalanche are safely going to be in the playoffs, probably somewhere in the hundreds points. Next up, fourth, the New York Rangers. Similarly, I didn't have them that high in my top 10. I think they were either 6th or 7th, but this team is running back basically the same team that won the President's Trophy. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to finish top 3 in the Metro Division. I can maybe see. We'll get to it. We'll get to the other teams in the Metro Division potentially. Florida Panthers. They were 3rd on my preseason top 10, but I think that there maybe is a chance that they could get off to an extremely slow start. They're probably banged up, coming off back-to-back deep Stanley Cup runs. So still, I think they're going to make the playoffs, but they're maybe not as high as some of the top 4 teams that I have that are a little bit more rested and kind of reloaded or got better this offseason compared to the Florida Panthers. They got some solid cheap deals, but they're definitely going to be a worse team this season. Number 6, the Boston Bruins. Even though I don't love their offseason, especially the Linus Ullmark trade, in terms of as long as Swayman can kind of carry the load in terms of playing 60 games, they're going to be a better team next season. They added Zadorov and Lindholm, who I do think are good players. I don't love the contracts, but they're going to be considering they were a 109-point team last year, and they arguably got better this offseason, they're probably going to make it. Carolina might be a little bit of a controversial one when looking at it. This is just more so betting on Rod Brind'Amour. Yes, they did lose a lot. Yes, I don't think they're going to be like a 110-point team, but Rod Brind'Amour is going to coach this team into somewhere in the hundreds. When looking at it, they still have important pieces. I think they are going to bring back Martin Necas, but they have guys like Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis is going to resign, Brett Burns, Slavin. Their key pieces are still there. Yes, they did lose guys like Brady Shea, Brett Pesce, Jake Gensel. Jake Gensel was a core piece for their run, but not an overall core guy. Most of their core is still there, and the reason why they got off to a rough start this most recent season was because of the goaltending, because of Freddie Anderson having blood clots. He was out. Ranta absolutely stunk. As long as Freddie Anderson's healthy, him and Kochetkov is actually going to be a pretty solid tandem, in my opinion. The Leafs, as the 8th least likely team to not miss the playoffs, 9th most likely, I guess. So in looking at them, with Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander, yes, they have some serious bottom 6 concerns. For me, I don't love their defense core. I like the defense core additions that they made in the short term with the OEL and Chris Tanev. 2 to 3 years from now, those deals are probably going to be goddamn disasters. But this team, as long as goaltending does not fumble, and I actually like their goalie tandem this year, Woll and Stolarz was fantastic in Florida, they should yet again safely be a playoff team. Now, getting into the top 8, most likely to fall out of the playoffs after making it last year. At number 8, We had the Vegas Golden Knights. Yes, I'm not too high on them. They weren't in my top 10, but I still think that this team has a very high floor when you consider the fact that their defense core is one of the best defense cores in the NHL. I think Aiden Hill, as long as he doesn't get hurt, should be able to play 55-ish solid games. Hopefully Samsonov is more so the goaltender that he was in the back half for this team. The forward core is pretty shallow, but I don't think Mark Stone's going to be going on an LTIR vacation this time around, especially considering they have like no picks to trade at the deadline. I still think they're going to be a playoff team. I understand if people think that they won't, but I still think they have enough firepower. And with that three-headed monster defense core, I still have them in the playoffs. The seventh most likely team, Vancouver Canucks. They were fifth or sixth on my power rankings. I think they're very talented, but this is a very volatile team when looking at the fact that they had one of the highest PDOs in the NHL. Everybody on this team, for the most part, had a career year last season. So there is multiple players that are potentially due for regression. Do I think all of them is going to fall off a cliff? No, but I do think that this Vancouver Canucks team, even though they are young, even though they are extremely talented, there is some severe volatility with this team. And I could definitely, even after winning the Pacific Division, I could see them potentially missing. But again, they're still only the seventh most likely. The Nashville Predators up next. And yes, they improved a shit ton. They did make the wild card last season, and they only really added Stamkos, they did lose Ryan McDonough, Marchessault, and Brady Shea, but the age of this team, I still think they're probably going to make the playoffs. They're only sixth, but when looking at it, the age of this team is a little bit concerning. Steven Stamkos is going to be 34. Marchessault is going to be 34. Roman Josi, I think, already is 34. Gustav Nyquist is not young. Ryan O'Reilly is not young. Soros and Forsberg are like they're young guys within their core, and they're still like 28 years old. So I would bet on them making the playoffs right now, but I also could see this being an utter disaster when looking at if some of their guys, like unlike the Canucks just had a high shooting percentage, so they're due for regression, but the Predators just have some of their guys start to naturally age out, and especially with maybe some other Western Conference teams coming up, I could see the Nashville Predators. It wouldn't shock me if the Nashville Predators were fantastic. It wouldn't shock me if they not stunk, but were like a 90-point team. They might be one of the most volatile teams coming into next season. The Winnipeg Jets should be a playoff team. I think that they're probably closer to the team that they were in the 2023 season versus the 2024 season where they had 110 points. Would have bet on them currently to make the playoffs, but they did lose a decent amount. Yes, Toffoli and Monahan were deadline acquisitions. They did lose Brendan Dillon went to the New Jersey Devils. They weren't really able to add much. So in looking at them, they still have the best best regular season goaltender in the NHL. I would bet on Hellebuck having a solid season. I'm not sure he's going to have a Vezina winning season. The defense core is a little bit shaky in my opinion. I still like the forward core, but I think they are going to come down a little bit. How much we'll see. But they're definitely, I'd say, on track to be like a 98 to 102 point team and could potentially miss the playoffs. Now, within the top four, it would not shock me one bit if any of these teams miss the playoffs. And that fourth most likely one to miss is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, when looking at Tampa Bay, they are very shallow. They're a very shallow team for the most part. The defense core is just not that impressive. Even though I like the add of Ryan McDonough, he is starting to get up there in age. He could potentially be a solid number two to Victor Hedman, but even Victor Hedman, the guy doesn't play a ton of defense nowadays. Fantastic offensive defenseman. The top six is one of the best in hockey, especially after adding Jake Gensel. Yes, they lost Stamkos, but that's an upgrade. What was I about to say? That's an upgrade, but still, the bottom six is very concerning. They have a pretty solid prospect pool now that they got Connor Geekie, but I don't think that any of their guys are really ready to take a step like an Isaac Howard, like a Connor Geekie, like an Ethan Gauthier. I don't think those guys are ready to contribute immediately. So this team is going to have to rely on a Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, and Jake Gensel to just absolutely outscore some of their defensive problems. But if Vasilevsky plays like 2021, 2022 Vasilevsky, they should make the playoffs. If he plays like 2024 Vasilevsky, there's a real serious chance of them missing, considering how competitive it is in the Eastern Conference right now. At third, I got my New York Islanders. I'm pretty optimistic heading into the season. I think that they probably will be a playoff team. I wouldn't bet my life on it, but when looking at them, it's going to come down to, will they fix the penalty kill? It was the worst in the entire NHL last year. It was like 73%. It was god-awful. It was worse than San Jose, worse than Chicago. On top of, if Ilya Sorokin actually shows up, this team, if they can get the 23rd best penalty kill, which is still pretty shit, and Ilya Sorokin can give us 9-15 hockey, we should cruise to high 90s points. I don't think that that's controversial. On top of adding a guy like Anthony Duclair, we're only losing, I don't want to call them dead weight because they're Islanders legends, but Cal Clutterbuck and Matt Martin probably no longer going to be with the team, on top of some guys hopefully having a little bit of a bounce back. But I still believe in this team. I'd say it's like 60-40, like 65-35 right now in terms of making the playoffs. A team that I would basically have tied with the New York Islanders at second is the Washington Capitals. It's weird. 91 point or 92 point team last year, but I think that we can agree that they far out exceeded expectations and out exceeded their metrics last year. At 5-on-5, they were like the sixth worst in terms of expected goals percentage. They did have solid special teams. Charlie Lindgren played out of his mind. So I think that last year, in reality, they were like more so, if you sim the season 10 times, they're probably around an 85-point team, but they upgraded a shit ton. So now I think that they are a legit playoff potential Eastern Conference threat. So like Eastern Conference wildcard, Eastern Conference Metro third division, not to actually win the Eastern Conference, but I still don't really love their forward core. They don't have a number one center, Dylan Strome. It's going to depend if PLD can really step up. Andrew Mangiapane is going to have to have a massive bounce back season, getting paid $5.8 million, gives up a second round pick to get him. But I love their defensive moves. The defense core is legit. It's arguably a top 5 defense core in the NHL now, in the Eastern Conference, not the entire NHL. In the Eastern Conference, especially adding Jacob Chikrin and Matt Roy on top of the goaltending tandem, looking very solid with Logan Thompson. It's going to be interesting to see if Charlie Lindgren can repeat last year's success, but they should be a solid goaltending tandem. I would pick them right now over teams like Ottawa, Buffalo. They'd probably make the play. Actually, I don't know. Someone's going to miss the playoffs, but I think the Washington Capitals definitely now are between the 7th to 9th to 10th best team in the entire Eastern Conference. Them and the New York Islanders are basically interchangeable. And then lastly, I got the LA Kings. I'm not going to lie. I was very disappointed by this team this offseason when looking at their moves. I like that they got off the PLD contract, but you're relying on Darcy Kemper and Dave Riddick now to be your 1-2 goalie tandem. And even losing Pierre-Luc Dubois, even though he wasn't that good, the bottom 6 is kind of shit on this team. You got to rely on Kopitar and Doughty still being high elite level players next season. If they start to regress, this team can really come crumbling down. Right now, I would pick, a Minnesota Wild. I would go with the Minnesota Wild to jump the LA Kings. Meanwhile, after the offseasons that the Islanders and Capitals had this season, I'm not sure if any of the Eastern Conference teams right now, I would say, are going to pass them. Not saying it's going to be 15 of the same playoff teams. There's obviously going to be some surprises. But right now, the LA Kings are the one team where I probably would point to them and say, they're going to miss the playoffs. So that's the final. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about this? The top 10 is top 8 is as follows: Knights, Canucks, Predators, Jets, Tampa Bay, Islanders, Washington, and LA. Let me know in the comments. What do you think? Am I a biased Islanders fan for not having them number 1 or number 2? I understand Washington did improve more on paper this offseason. I'm just going to believe in my team, and I think the stats, honestly, bad. They have stuff that they can easily fix. So yeah, let me know in the comments. What do you think? I'll be seeing you in the next one.